On today's show, I have Jeremy Rice, and we're going to be talking about his new album called Jeremy Rice and the Legendary Fist of Takanawa, and he's got a new single from that called Somebody Like You. So welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, we're going to get knee-deep into your new music, but before we start, you are from St. John's in Newfoundland in Canada.
Yes, that's right.
You live in Quebec City now, but I'm really curious because St. John's is a smaller, little seaside village. How did that form you? Is there like a music scene in St. John's?
Oh, it's pretty huge actually. There's a really big network of artists. It's just generally speaking, a very artistic town, and there's a very big support system. I find people sort of there's competition and support, and it's a sort of a healthy family, I guess. It's big enough that there are a number of opportunities available, but it's small enough that it's relatively easy to get recognized. I'd say St. John's
cool.
is probably it's about, I would say there's 150,000 people. It's still the capital city, so it's not tiny. It's not like quite the size of Quebec City, but it's still it still has a bit of weight.
Well, sure, and one thing from your bio is, besides where you're from is, the bands that influenced you growing up. And I know you mentioned like Electric Light Orchestra, and it sounds like, a lot of the cool 70s bands, Supertramp. Is that from like your parents' collection, or, how did you get exposed to that kind of music?
Well, I think that's probably a big part of it. My parents are both music lovers, and I remember sort of rediscovering, even in the quietest moments, my Supertramp, and listening to these songs kind of by fluke, and just remembering them without really knowing from where, and my mother tells me that when I was really just an infant, that she was playing that record and Breakfast in America just like nonstop. So I think that I had no choice. I was really,
sure.
Sort of a captive audience, but I don't complain about it.
I'd say in today's musical landscape, it's really refreshing to hear someone, putting out new music that evokes that music, that really well-produced pop rock. And I think when I first heard your voice, it reminded me a lot of like Bob Dylan. Do you ever get that comparison?
Interesting. That's the first time. I got like Tom Petty sometimes. Just trying to The Clash a little bit. Those are a couple of comparisons I've heard, but I've never heard Bob Dylan. But
well, the Tom Petty makes sense too.
Quality. What's that?
Yeah, the Tom Petty makes sense. It reminded me of, remember the Traveling Wilburys in the 80s?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which which had Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, but also from ELO.
Yeah, Jeff Lynne.
Refresh my memory. Yes. So I can see kind of the ELO kind of influence and all that, but kind of through like an 80s filter.
Yeah, that's right, and that would make sense, right? Because that was I was born in '78, so started really, that was, I guess, the early stages of becoming a music appreciator. I guess you probably don't start until after 2. So that was a good time for music, I think, for me anyway.
Well, your album came out just last month, so it's still very fresh. But I love the way you described it. On SoundCloud, you say that Jeremy Rice and the Legendary Fist of Takanawa is an album about love, betrayal, solitude, and death, all presented in one hooky little package. And I love that you said hooky little package, because you do have really strong musical hooks, and your music is very easy on the ear. It's very pleasant to listen to.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, and besides, you're promoting the new single "Somebody Like You," but I kind of went through the whole thing, and one cut that really jumped out at me was "Under the Ground," which had a very reggae feel, and even though you sing it in English, you actually have like a French rap in it.
Yeah. That's actually when I first moved to Quebec, I sort of that was a challenge to threw it myself. I was like, well, let's give it a shot and see what you can do in French, because I'd never really written anything in French before. I grew up with it because my mom is from Paris originally, so I grew up bilingual. I was fortunate to have that, but it was never my go-to language for songwriting. I'm very comfortable with English, and I just find it's a language that's very conducive to musicality. So it just I was scared to jump to the French, right?
Well, when you perform live, even though most of your albums seem to be in English, when you perform live, do you mix French in with the English?
I do more and more. I mean, for the CD release show, because all of the guys in the band are francophones, right? So we've been having a lot of fun sort of translating the songs, but like trying to translate them in the worst kind of way, just find the least aesthetically pleasing way to get the idea across. And so we kind of make jokes out of the songs by translating them into French, sort of distastefully, right? So when I was on the show, or when we performed live, I was pulling out a lot of these things, but mostly just to make the band laugh. I don't know that the audience really was as in on it as the rest of us, right? But yeah. So I mean, most of the French happens in between, the patter in between the sets and stuff, in between the songs and the sets, and of course in that song "Underneath the Ground." Yep.
Well, I can kind of get a feel for the fun you have with the band, because the first song you released, and help me with the name, but is it pronounced Ariane or Ariane?
Oh yeah, Ariane. Yeah.
Ariane.
Yeah.
And you did a music video for it with the band that's very upbeat and has a lot of, I think, energy and humor in it.
Yeah, hey, I was pretty happy with that, and you're totally right. Like, you could sort of see the fun that the band has. I don't think we could have pulled that off without having, enjoying each other's company as a group, because there's nothing to it. It's all just feeling, and so I basically just captured a whole bunch of stuff and just cut it together. But I mean, obviously, if we were bored the day of the shoot, then there'd be no content, right? So, it's a great bunch of guys. It really is. Great bunch of guys.
Yeah, and you also co-directed that video. Are you really involved in, different aspects like that, like the visual and the video?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I was more a visual artist before. It was more of the visual that was interesting to me when I was younger. I got into music, sort of in my early 20s. I've worked with video. I do a lot of like graphic design and illustration and stuff like that. I like trying to take an idea and turn it into something concrete. So whatever the medium is, it's maybe secondary. But I just happen to find music is a really fun medium to work with, so I tend to gravitate towards that. But it's nice to switch it up. So yeah, I like to play with the video.
Well, going into your back catalog, from your previous album, Car Songs.
Mhm.
You did an animated video, Lobotomy, that you did. I think for another band. I mean, it was called The Times was the band, and the song was Lobotomy. That you actually did a video for them. Am I getting that right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean that was my band in St. John's. So I mean the setup was somewhat similar. I was writing the songs, and then the elements are fairly much the same, but it was a different It was a different group of guys. Also had a fun time with those guys too. But yeah, so yeah, it was I just had this idea for the video. I started doing a couple of drawings, and then before you knew it, I just kind of scanned them into the computer and just started trying to see how I could make them work together, and it manifested itself into the video for Lobotomy. Yeah, it's worth looking at. Just it's interesting at the very least, right?
Well, it's part of the fun on your website. They can see these videos, but I'm real curious. So what do you think is the biggest evolution since your band The Times up to now, where you're especially, you're more forward as Jeremy Rice? Do you just see the evolution as you just coming out of your shell, just putting yourself out there more?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just that I do a lot of I guess I do a lot of work for how do I say? I work in music. I have a lot of contract work. I also work for a video game company. I guess part of my idea was it was sort of a means to get the name out there for A, as an artist, but B, as professionally, I guess they're both the same, but there may be two different facets to the work that I do, and I felt that with having a band name, I don't know, it was harder to make the association. I mean, for example, right now, I have my discography is fairly convoluted because if you go back, you've got the Times, you've got the Sellouts, you've got Time Score, you've got the Traveling Salesman. These are all bands that I was in, I had had a major role in. But if somebody wanted to check and see the history, they wouldn't necessarily know where to look, right? So I told myself, well, I'll always be Jeremy Rice, so I might as well stick with that, and then whatever the incarnation of the next project will be, it'll still sort of, the name will still be the same. So it'll be easier to trace my history, I guess, going forward. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think a lot of people nowadays are, it's the era of the Renaissance man has come back. Technology has allowed us to wear a lot more hats and do them all well. So it's not like you have to just do one thing nowadays.
No, agreed. In fact, I think given the fact that we have all these possibilities at our disposal, it would be almost a shame to stick with just one thing, right?
Well, and also, you play guitar too. You seem modest about that, but you really have mastered the guitar too. Well,
I mean, I enjoy it. I would say that it might be misleading because a lot of the lead parts on a lot of the lead parts on the Time stuff was played by my friend Leon White, who's an amazing guitarist. So up against him, I can't say that I have no bragging rights at all. But it's true that everything on Takanawa was there might have been a couple of instances. No, I think I did most of the guitar on Takanawa. That was a fun challenge because I'd never really played lead before, yeah.
Well, that's great because you just have the appearance now where it seems like it'd be exciting to see you live as well as videos. And I think a lot of newer bands, when they're starting out, they think, oh, we can make a video, put ourselves out there. But it seems like you have to make that leap to give people the impression that you're going to be a fun live band. So are you moving more in that direction and thinking more about your live stage shows?
Yeah. I mean, that's I've just finished doing up sort of a live, a live medley, sort of a promotional video, just for that exact purpose, to sort of demonstrate what the live show might look like, because you're right, it's one thing to be able to put together something. I mean, with the technology we have, you can put anything nice together in a home studio, but it's different when you have to bring that show to the stage, especially when you have all these elements, because the Tekanawa album is it's fairly thick with layers, right? So trying to bring that to the stage, it's I guess it like my father, when he listened to the record, he said, "Well, how are you going to do this live?" Because he couldn't see how you could put it on the stage, and it was a challenge. But I mean, we got 5 guys, and everybody sings, so we were able to find a way to just trim the little bits and pieces that weren't totally necessary, and managed to get a fairly good replica of the album live on stage. Anyway, I'm digressing, I think, but what I mean to say is that I'm very happy with the live show, and it's a very important part of the whole project.
So where have been some of your favorite places that you've been playing this past year?
Well, honestly, like I'm going to have to tell you, Quebec City. Because well, basically, like we held off for the album release. That was our big, so I guess our big, moment of exposure, right? So now it's basically starting from here. I mean, quite honestly, we've been playing together since I'd say March. So it's not even. It's I've known the guys for a long time, and I've played with them in different situations. But we haven't. We're as a band. We've only been a unit for about half a year. So the plan is now to start doing some shows in Montreal, sort of around the Quebec City area, and then do some gigs in Ontario, and then the plan is next fall to go and do a tour south of the border, but I can't give you any specific dates yet because that's still being arranged.
Sure. Well, nowadays, so much of performance is geared around festivals. Are there any really cool music festivals in Montreal or, in just, Canada itself that you think you would just really fit into?
Well, I mean, there are a number. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't even tell you. There's one in Montreal over the summer. What's it called? It's called Osheaga, I think, which is a pretty big one. And I think it happens on the island. I hear a lot about it. I haven't had the opportunity to go, but it's sort of it's a coveted one. I know we just submitted for a festival in France. Les Inuits, I'm trying to remember what it is now. So I'm not just sort of limiting myself to Canada necessarily. I'm just sort of taking a look at what other opportunities are out there. Because I think that what's kind of cool about having the Francophone background is that it sort of opens us up to potentially different markets as well. So yeah, we're looking at those avenues as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's always kind of a big deal when you're releasing an album and you think, okay, where do we put our time and energy into promoting it? You want to perform live, you want to put out music videos, you want to do interviews. How have you kind of divvied up your time to think, how are we going to fully promote this? Where do you put your most time and effort?
That's a good question. I mean, a lot of it has been. I've been fortunate enough to be working with a publicist who has taken a lot of the weight off my shoulders. Pardon me. I mean, for me, I guess I've tried to specifically focus on promotional media. Say, for example, working on videos and coming up with visual concepts to, either for merchandising or just enhancing sort of like trying to tweak the image of the band, the project. So I guess I'm more trying to focus on the creative aspect of the promotion, and then I with with regards to contacting people, I do take on some of that. But yeah, as I said, working with Last Tango Productions, they help me a lot with the publicity side of things. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's so cool about Canada is they've always been very supportive of their musicians, which includes devoting, substantial radio time. So I'm wondering, how has, Canadian radio responded, and is that still, going on? Is Canada still saying, hey, we want to allot this much time on our radio to Canadian artists?
Well, it's funny that because yes, there's still like they call it CanCon, the CanCon ratio, and I can't remember if it's 30 or 50%. But yeah, the Canadian radio stations need to air a specific amount of Canadian content on the air. So I mean, I know for a fact that the Takanawa record has played. Like on CBC Radio, which is sort of the national, our national radio station. There's sort of there are a bunch of different stations in every province. So I've been fortunate enough to get on their playlist and get aired nationally. And yeah, I know in St. John's in Newfoundland, we've had a bit of luck getting airplay there. We got a couple of connections there. What's funny about where I am is that they have not only do they have sort of the CanCon regulations, but it's more of a language thing, and in Quebec, I think it's 50% of what gets aired has to be francophone, and so what they tend to do is reserve all the anglophone songs for like that's what they'll choose is the sort of top 40, popular songs, the obvious stuff, that the hits that they want to play, right? So they often will favor francophone artists as opposed to anglophone artists from here because it helps them get to take care of their Franco obligations. Does that make sense?
Yes,
so
very, very much so. Yeah.
Right. So as an anglophone artist in Quebec, it's actually relatively challenging to get airplay here. And I've gotten airplay. I'm lucky. I know in La Beauce, it's not too far from Quebec. There's a station that has playing Ariane, and we are getting airplay here, but it's been a real struggle, understandably. I kind of knew that going into it, but yeah, it's just kind of interesting how that works. Is that it's all really in Quebec. It's based on the language, right? So that's an extra barrier. So it plays a lot more outside of Quebec.
Yeah. Well, it's always nice to hear when people support local people. Sometimes they say you're more famous outside your hometown, but it's also nice when your hometown or just people near you are supporting you too. I mean, do you find there's a real supportive music community where you live?
I think, yes, I would say yes. I feel like with us and our project in particular, the amount of support we've gotten from the people around, the network that we've sort of built in Quebec City has been really positive. And people would keep coming back to us with very very encouraging, positive feedback. And I don't know. I feel like it's one thing to think it; it's another thing to go out of your way to share it with them and encourage people to keep on doing it. So yeah. I mean, I must say I do feel it's a very encouraging, nurturing environment for an artist, right?
One question I always like to ask musicians is, if you could open for any band or artist, who would it be? And especially one where you think that their fans would really get into your music, who would complement your fan base. Who would be like your dream current, contemporary band to do that for?
Oh, jeez. I wasn't ready for this. Well,
It's a big question.
I know. I'll tell you. I don't. The thing is that the first band that comes to mind. I don't think that we probably would be a good fit. I'm not sure, but the first band that comes to mind is Daft Punk. I just feel like that would be a super fun show, and but I don't know that we'd be a good fit for it. It is, it's fun, it's upbeat, but like stylistically, it's very different. But I don't know. That is a band that I truly adore. If I thought there was a way that I could get in on that live show, I'd be floored. And given that I can't think of another act off the top of my head, I'm going to have to stick with that.
Well, you picked a popular band, so that's great. Well, we're going to wrap up in a little bit, but before we do, I want to make sure that people know where to find you online. So where's your website, and where can people find and buy your music?
Well, the website is it's jeremyrice.net, JEREMYRICE.net. People can find Jeremy Rice tunes on pretty much all the platforms. Apple Music, Spotify, SoundCloud. So if you want to buy it, then I guess probably I would say Apple Music, maybe that's the one to go to. I don't know. I might get 0.0003 more cents than I would if it was on Spotify, but I can't be sure about I've never paid attention to those numbers. So it's pretty much available on all the platforms. You can also check for the band's, the times, so THYMES, and the sellouts too. It's something to check out. There's a bunch of stuff there. You're bound to find at least a little something you like.
Well, I encourage people to go there not just to learn about your music, but to watch the videos, because you've got links to all the YouTube videos, so I would start there. But last question, what is going to be the next song you release from your album?
I think it's going to be Underneath the Ground, which you mentioned earlier.
Oh, my goodness, Sam. A little reggae with the French rap.
Yeah. I'm working on a video for it too. It's the next step up now, so I'm trying to step up my game, so it's a little more challenging. But there's some more animations. It's a mix of live footage and animation, and it's coming together. So I'm hoping that it's probably going to be a New Year thing, but fairly early in the new year, I think we're gonna pump that out, and that'll be the next release off the album.
I'm glad you said that, because I think that's my favorite song off there. There's just something about hearing that French rap that is so cool.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad you like it. I think it's one of my favorites too. It changes every day, but there's something dark about it. I think when the guitar kicks in with the bass and in the the whoa 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 whoa, and the lyrics are great. Whoa 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 whoa. But yeah, I don't know. There is something unique about that song. So I'm glad you like it.
And that is off Jeremy Rice and the Legendary Fist of Takanawa. I've been talking to Jeremy Rice. Love your music. Really looking forward to your next video, and I just really appreciate you taking out the time from up in Canada to give me a call and chat.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it.